of the Lord. I'm not sure if you know this, but I went to 2 seminaries to train to be a priest. Firstly, I did what was the equivalent of the kindergarten year, the nursery year, in the Royal English College in Valladolid in Spain. Valladolid being in that northern territory, the old capital city of the northern part of Spain. The English College in Valladolid has a long and distinguished history for training priests in the English and the Welsh mission. In fact, some of those 40 martyrs of England and Wales who we venerate during those Reformation trained there. People like St. John Lloyd is an example of those who trained and then were sent back on the mission, back to these countries where, of course, they were captured. I did the rest of my time, I know I make it sound like a sort of a prison sentence, but it was. I did the rest of my time in Birmingham in a place called Oscott College near Sutton Coldfield. Oscott itself has a very different but nonetheless distinguished history and important for these lands. If you remember that sort of Reformation time where it was not only illegal to be a Catholic, to practice that Catholic faith in the public arena, but to be found ministering to Catholics was a great scandal, and of course we know the consequence through those 40 martyrs, and many more, I'm sure. But in that latter part of that later Reformation period, of course, things began to calm down. There was a gradual change, if you like. And so a very small college was established to begin to train priests in England for the English mission, something quite controversial at the time. And so, until we get to 1829, to the Emancipation Act through Parliament, where everything then began to change, where no longer was it illegal to practice your faith and to minister to those of Catholic faith. And so that Emancipation Act marked a great moment in the life of our land. And so, at that time, a new Oscott College was built, much bigger, to support the ministry of training priests for the English and Welsh mission, commissioned to be built by Bishop Thomas Walsh, who was the Vicar Apostolic of the Midlands district, which I think stretched even here into Wales at that time. So from the Emancipation Act of 1829, Oscott College then opened in 1834, so not long after the Act was passed. The site which Thomas Walsh chose for the site of the new Oscott College was quite particular. If you've ever been to Birmingham or been to Oscott, you'll appreciate that the college is situated at the top of a hill, a very big hill, which overlooks the whole of the city of Birmingham. Indeed, it's a place that can still be seen from the city centre as you look up into the hills. And I've got a show and tell for you, because it's quite a big, imposing red brick building, if you can see. Don't tell anyone I haven't had it framed yet. You can see, and this building can be seen all that stretches into the city of Birmingham. And so you can imagine living there, looking out of an evening to the lit up city of Birmingham, and as they look up to us. It's something which is quite spectacular. Bishop Thomas Walsh the vicar apostolic at the time who commissioned this great building, chose the site on purpose. He chose the site because he wanted to make a big, bold statement. And nothing is bold than sticking a red brick building at the top of a hill. And that is that our faith is here, and that our faith is here to stay. And so if we use the sort of biblical language we find in the gospel today, we're saying that our Catholic faith, which for so long has been hidden under a basket, that cannot be hidden, that the time has now come for us to be able to share that faith proudly in the sight of men, as the gospel tells us, to literally shout it from that rooftops, the gospel a couple of weeks ago. So great a prominence then was Oscott College to play in making this big and bold statement right at the start of this turning point in our Catholic history in these lands, that when the restoration of the hierarchy takes place a little bit later on, so in other words, when dioceses were once again allowed to be established, the Diocese of Newport and Menevia, the Diocese of Birmingham, Westminster, all of these were allowed to be re-established with their bishops, once again the first time since the Reformation, that Oscott College was chosen to be the site for their first meeting. And a very humble old priest was asked to speak to the newly restored bishops' conference, if you like, to the newly restored group of bishops. And this old priest we know now as St. John Henry Newman, and who gave a very famous speech to the bishops of those lands. The reality is, of course, that the physical building, that red brick structure that you saw just a moment ago, so profoundly standing at the top of that hill, is only but a symbol which points to something greater. The legacy of Bishop Thomas Walsh is that the people, those men formed within the walls of that college for the English and the Welsh mission, they themselves become that light which shines in the sight of men. And we, here in Cwmbran, we can reflect that same principle within our own context. All of us, gathered here as children of God, called together as a family, formed by him at the feet of the Master. This isn't what makes the parish. It's the fact of our sending out, of our going out, of that focus outwards towards mission, so that in seeing your good works, they may give the praise to your Father in heaven, as our gospel reminds us. It's the fact that we are outward looking, and it's our outward looking vision to those periphery pointers of our parish which will enable us and ensures that we are able to continue to bear fruit, that we don't fall into that trap of stagnation. Because faith is attractive. Without the outward thirst for mission of those first bishops who gathered at Oscott College, without the mission-centred focus of those priests which it produced, there would be no second spring of faith in these lands. And the same is true, isn't it, for us as we reflect here within our own parish context. Our mission-centred thirst to reach out, to be that bridge of encounter to those who we meet. We can learn a lot, I think, from Oscott's legacy. Let us be confident in asserting a mission-centred focus, with our goals always to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ to everyone without exception. For a city built on a hilltop cannot be hidden, and indeed shouldn't be hidden. Our gospel today reminds us that this has to remain a non-negotiable factor for our flourishing and for our survival. Amen.